My name is TK Sheffield. I write stories for readers to laugh and escape, and this is the Wispresso Cafe where books, authors, and Wisconsin meet. Today, I get to turn the tables on Ken Humphrey, the wildly popular operations director of WWA and co-host of the Midwest Writers Room with Luella Schmidt. But before we get to Ken, we have a special guest, Lily of the Nook Lounge and Bookstore in Manitowoc. So we're going to talk with Ken and Lily, but first let me give you a couple of announcements of things coming up. Critique classes. There are a few spots open in the classes, such as getting started with memoir with Catherine Stover and a strictly fiction class with Lori Shear. So if you're inclined, run over there and sign up today before those classes fill. Everything else is full. And congrats to author Katrina Surwey with editor Lisa Lickle on the release of 1,000 Miles of Poetry from WWA Press. There's a book release party today, this afternoon in West Bend at Ridge Run Park from 1 to 5, including a reading, snacks, and games. And it's a poem walking celebration. So congrats both to Katrina and Lisa. Also, check out new episodes of the Midwest Writers Room podcast, chapter breaks, and full episodes of your favorite authors from the Midwest. So thank you, everybody. Christy and Roger, glad to see you. I want to tell you a little bit about our special guest today, and that is Lily Schuett, and she is the owner and operator of the Nook Lounge and Bookstore in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So along with books, and Lily, you're going to have to tell me more about these, they specialize in mocktails like Underworld Elixir and Violet Storm. They have a menu with energy drinks, coffee, and paninis, which all sounds amazing. So first, before we get to the collective that's coming up in May, Lily, tell me about the menu.
Yeah. So obviously living in Wisconsin, there's a lot of drinking, a lot of alcohol where we are, and we noticed that specifically in Manitowoc, there was a lack of, I guess, just non-alcoholic options. You go to some place and you ask for a non-alcoholic option, and you get a kitty cocktail, and it's just not pretty and fun. So Jessica, the other co-owner, her and I got together in 2024, early 2024, and we just decided, hey, we're going to open it up. So we started, we knew we were going to sell books as well. So we started drafting all these mocktail ideas, and we've got, classics like your old fashioned essence. We have a pineapple whiskey smash. We've got, we can do margaritas. So we've done a nice and spicy margarita. So our mocktails, they are constantly shifting for summer and fall and winter. And so just always trying to keep up with the new and fun drinks, and they taste just like an old fashioned or a margarita, because we do have the non-alcoholic spirits. So yeah, that's what's on there. And then we got a lot of other options. So we do have coffee, we have some small bites, paninis, and then our energy drinks.
Great. So you've got people coming in and you're open regular hours, right?
Yep.
At the shop, and you're downtown.
Yes, we are downtown Manitowoc. So we've got a wonderful, beautiful location. We got really lucky. We had to do a lot of work on the space, but our space is beautiful now. So
Oh, great. Good for you. Well, so you've got a special event coming up. The Nook Collective is an author and vendor fair hosted by the Nook in Manitowoc on May 2nd. So you've got 50 Midwest authors and vendors joining for a full day of signing and reader fun. You've got tickets available on Eventbrite at the Nook Lounge and Bookstores page, and then you can also check out more on your social media pages. But the event has got drinks being served, merch, and more. And then afterward, there's an after party with PJs and slippers and snacks and bookish trivia. So tell us about the event in May.
yeah, we are really excited. I guess you could call Manitowoc a little bit of an older, sleepy place, and so it is definitely evolving and changing. But we knew, surrounding the literature scene, that we wanted to change. We're the second bookstore, or we're the second bookstore that's open in the past couple of years. We have three bookstores here, indie bookstores, and the others are great. We work really closely with them. But nobody was doing a large event like this. I wanted readers and authors to come here. We've got a beautiful area on the lakeshore. So, yeah, that takes place May 2nd. We have two different tickets. We have a morning ticket and an evening ticket. Today or this year, it is just one day. We're hoping to be able to grow and do 2 days next year. And we've got, like you said, we'll have merch. So we'll be there with the Nooks serving drinks at the bar. It's at a beautiful venue. It's actually a wedding venue and it's just gorgeous. So we'll be serving our mocktails and we have a bookish curated menu that we'll be doing. So we've got that. And then, yeah, we just have Midwest based authors and vendors of all different genres. So they'll all be there. Yeah.
That's great. I love the energy. I love the energy you're bringing to it. And you're right, to just celebrate books. And I just read an article, I think it was yesterday, about the how we've all heard sad tales of of retail and the economy, but indie bookstores are defying any any sort of limitations or bad, I mean,
Right.
they're opening up, and I think in Southeast Wisconsin here we've had at least 5 or 6 new ones open, and it's just great for towns. And I think it's the new gathering place for people beyond a coffee shop. Yeah. So congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
now this is being recorded, so this will go up on the Midwest Writers Room YouTube channel, so you can reference that. And everybody, so check out your socials for the Nook Collective about this upcoming event. Yeah, your store is the Nook Lounge and Bookstores, and then
Yep.
you've got this event in May, and you have Facebook pages that people can follow, right?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So thank you for being here. I just love the
Ooh,
idea, and best of luck with everything.
thank you.
You bet. So if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat and I will look for them too. So, um, okay. Well, I have a note from Ken. Sign up for the classes have already started. Thank you for that note, Ken. Is there any room yet left in the classes?
No, no, they've all been filled.
Okay, classes are all filled. So never mind. Oops, the beauty of live podcasting. Anyway, so here we go. On to Ken Humphrey. Ken is the author of 9 novels. Ken, I did not know when I read your bio, I didn't realize it was 9. Good for you. Across multiple genres, middle grade, young adult, and mystery thriller. He relies heavily on his immediate orbit for story and character inspiration, such as setting the first thriller novel against his years catching shoplifters for national retailers, or crafting a trilogy of zombie novels around his children. He lives near Lake Geneva and spends his off hours in pointless pursuits, like golfing, keeping German vehicles running, or promising to get in shape. So, welcome, Ken, to the show, basically to your show.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. And I promise I will start working out tomorrow. Tomorrow.
You and me both. So, okay, so I read your bio, but tell us a little bit more. You dropped some Easter eggs in there, your years catching shoplifters, crafting the trilogies about zombies. So give us a little bit more there.
So let me just start with the shoplifter thing, right? For about 7 years, from my late teens to mid 20s, I caught shoplifters as my job, for chains like Shopko, Kmart, Dayton Hudson Corporation. And while it was a extremely low paying, somewhat high hazard job, it may to this day still be my favorite job that I ever did. Because it was just, I mean, this is back in the Wild West too, back in the late 80s and 90s when you could actually still make citizen arrests and not worried about,
Oh, wow.
somebody suing you left and right, or everybody carrying weapons. This is back when we could chase people to the parking lot and tackle them and skin ourselves up and break our elbows and stuff like that. But it was such a blast of a job that when I wrote my first thriller novel, I'm like, all right, the lead character, this is how he breaks open this, he stumbles upon this conspiracy because he catches shoplifters and he arrests some kids who kind of open up his eyes to this underground conspiracy that's happening in his town. But it was more like, I just want to write about catching shoplifters.
Well, and that was back before cameras, right? I mean, there's a line of delineation for a lot of us where we probably are one of the last generations who grew up without iPhones and computers, right? When I first
Yeah.
started in corporate communications, I literally published the company newsletter. You printed it because email didn't exist. And so I'm fascinated by that, that delineation there of this advent of computers and now how AI is going to do the same thing. It's going to change the world. Computers change the world, AI is going to do it too. So
Yeah, we had cameras, but we were the fancy store because ours were in color. There's the big bubbles, over the
yeah.
ceiling where you could control and zoom and pan. But yeah, we were a flagship store that got the fancy color cameras. I think we
So
had like 12 of those.
you weren't a secret shopper stealthily moving through the store. You were watching on
Oh,
a
both.
camera.
I did
Oh,
both.
boy.
I'd spot a good prospect on camera, and then I'd bail from the office and just track them down on the sales floor and follow them from there.
Okay.
So that was always kind of the common way I'd come across it.
Were there techniques? Were there, did you kind of saw a pattern every now and then? And I'm sure you
Yes.
use those patterns in your book. Writers recognize patterns and we use them in our books.
Yes, there were patterns, a lot of them in the behavior. Like if somebody's very twitchy about other people walking past them in the aisle, like they always look, or there's certain aisles that I just always labeled lifter alleys because
Okay.
they'd have like a high overhead and it kind of gave this sensation of being isolated. So somebody would pick up, and there was merchandise. Certain merchandise is always more attractive than others. And so if we'd see somebody carrying that type of merchandise, like a bunch of CDs, for instance,
Mm.
and they'd head towards the lifter aisle, it's like, uh-oh, keep a special eye out.
For those who don't know what CDs are,
Yeah. Back in the 90s when we didn't have streaming music and you had to actually buy physical media and have a player. The
right?
wild old days.
Remember eight tracks? I mean, I can remember, eight tracks, right?
I
If
remember.
there was a guy who had an eight track, he was cool.
Yep,
You
my parents had them.
know? So anyway, so where did you grow up?
So the majority of my
Where
youth
were those
was
shoplifters, in other words?
the majority of my youth was spent in Rochester, Minnesota. That's where I started. And I lived in a few different towns across Minnesota after, in college and then after college. And Mankato, Minnesota is probably where I did the longest stint of catching my
Mhm.
shoplifters for ShopGo. But yeah, I just hit up all the Minnesota locales in southern Minnesota until probably my mid 20s. And then I left and never returned, never went back, never moved back to Minnesota.
Um, so the next question this follows that. So leading into what you've done with nine novels and you're working with WWA and you're one of, hosting a podcast, were you always a reader?
I was, very similar to many other author childhoods, as I read all the time growing up, whether it was comic books. I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. And then as I got into my early teen years, I started reading those military type books like The Executioner, The Destroyer, The Terminator, all these which is really just guys running around firing guns. But I
Right,
always
right.
knew that I wanted to write. And I actually went to school and got a degree in graphic illustration with a minor in English, thinking, oh, I can do, video game covers, book covers, right? That type of stuff. Or there's more of an emphasis for me on the art aspect than the writing aspect. And now that's completely flipped. Right? I don't do really
Mhm.
much with art at all. And it's mostly writing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So what books, when you were young, what books were you reading?
So in the fantasy, the ones that really landed for me that to this day I look back very fondly upon, Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series. I love that. Terry Brooks, the Shannara series, the Sword of
Mhm.
Shannara, Elfstone of Shannara. Um, this Thomas Covenant series from Stephen R. Donaldson in the fantasy realm. Those are like three sets of series that just really stuck with me and that really impacted me when I was young.
So when did you pick up, and so when did Nelson DeMille come into your writing world?
Nelson DeMille, and for those who don't know, he's a contemporary thriller, mystery thriller writer, and I was probably in my late 20s where I came across his first book, and it was I think a friend or a relative might have gifted it to me and said, "Hey, here's a good book. I really like this." And as she was describing, I'm like, "Okay, I'll take a whack at it." And I think it was the Gold Coast. I think that
The
was
Gold
my
Coast, yeah, that was
intro,
mine too.
and I mean, I tell you what, if you're going to give me my listing of like top 10 books, the Gold Coast is always going to land somewhere in there
Yep.
because it was such a pivotal book. And so I immediately became a Nelson DeMille fan,
Mhm.
started buying, I went and I back read all of his stuff before that. And some I liked more than others. And it was an instant buy for me going forward until his later years, probably the last 10 years or so. I kind of got off his books because he got a little repetitive for me.
Hmm.
He kept mining the same territory, and
Hmm.
it got a little old. But boy, Nelson DeMille at his prime, he was my
Hmm.
go-to.
Yeah, the voice, and and when you first said that way back when we first met, and I was like, oh, okay, I knew I would like your books because the voice, which I think you emulate.
Hmm.
And we were talking earlier too, the motifs that you've embedded in the breakfast story, which we'll get to, but that to me shows somebody who has been a reader. And I think reading is exercise for your brain, and you can learn voice and you can learn technique and punctuation and grammar and vocabulary so passively just through a love of reading. And I think it definitely shows in your books.
Well, and I think too, a lot of authors, don't really find their voice until they read somebody. They're like, oh, this is how I want to write, or this is how I would write. And
Mhm.
when I read Millicent DeMille, I'm like, yep, that writing style resonates with me because that was kind of my default. What he was
Right.
doing was my default as well. So,
Yeah.
it was very good symbiosis right there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you have a unique link with your books to your family. Some
I
of them.
do.
So tell us about that.
All right. So this is a bit of a long story, and you may have heard this before, but when my oldest daughter, Kaylee, was coming up for graduation in 2018, I was thinking, I don't know what to get her, right? I've already bought her a car. I'm not going to buy her another one. What should I get the girl who has everything? And it was probably October of her senior year where I thought, oh, wait a minute. I'm going to write a book starring her and her closest friends. And at that time, they were all into The Walking Dead because that was Walking Dead at its popularity. So they would have watch parties on, I think, Sunday nights, and they're all very much into that genre, that series. So I wrote the first book called Ghoul, and it sets my daughter and four of her closest friends in kind of this Walking Dead type world. It's like 25 years after zombies in this series are called ghouls, after ghouls have taken over the world, and now humans are just sort of trying to scrape by and live in this world. And so the first book starred her and her friends, gave it to her and her friends' parents for graduation. And then 2022 came around, and my second kid, Cameron, he was getting ready to graduate. I'm like, oh, you know what? I've already bought him a car too. Maybe I'll just continue the series with him. And I hadn't thought about that when I first wrote Kaylee's. I didn't think about it as an extended series. I thought it was one and done. But I'm like, all right, no, I'll go back. And so I kind of had to figure out how to retro his story to fit hers. But it's the same thing, him and his closest friends. And all his closest friends pretty much played football with him in high school. So a lot of the themes in it, a lot of the way they act and the things that they do kind of align with the way football goes, like the structure of the plays, organization. That was kind of an homage to what his biggest interest was in high school. And so, same thing, he graduated and I gave the book to him and all his friends. And I think only one of his friends have read it. And I don't even think my son's read it. He doesn't read. Right. So he's got this book sitting on his bedside table, and it's probably an inch of dust on
Ungrateful
it.
children.
Yeah. Well, my third, Cole, is now graduating this year. So guess what I'm doing? And I like to play with the titles, right? So the first book is just called Ghoul. The second was called Ghouls and Boys. And
Oh,
I think the subtitle was on like, now there's these guys. And then this last book, starring Cole, and I don't know Cole's friends as well, but Cole has a girlfriend all the way through high school, which neither of my other two kids had. So I thought, oh, I'll bring Ella into this. And they become, they're a pair. They come as a pair in this book. So I titled this one Ghouls Gone Wild. And the subtitle is Now the Party Starts.
Christy Wopat says, first she needs to buy the Gold Coast because of you. And then she says, what about your wife? She needs a book now after this one's finished.
Yeah. Oof. That's treading some precarious ground there if I don't do that one right. I got to think about that one.
Anonymous. It'll be penned by an anonymous, you'll have to think of a pen name for that one.
There we go.
So thank you for that. That's delightful. And what a treasure for your kids. I know if they don't read it, they'll still always have it, they'll
Maybe
always
someday
have
in the
it.
future, one of them, they'll learn to read, right? The boys.
Yeah. Grands, you never know. Grandkids might
Right?
enjoy
Yep.
it. Yeah.
Immortalized.
So your favorite mysteries, books, and tropes.
So one of the things that I always love in mysteries and really I think any book is I like characters who aren't too serious, right? They don't take themselves seriously and they don't take the situation seriously. Like deep down, they may, but at the surface, they're always like, yeah, YOLO, it's fine. We'll get through, right? But they're taking it very seriously. And they have some sort of, I don't want to say special ability, but they have some sort of skill, hobby, ability that becomes a key ingredient to resolving whatever the plot problem is. Right. That always attracts me to that. Like, the guy that, works on timepieces as a hobby and somehow because of that is able to figure out the puzzle because he relates it to what he does working on timepieces, right? That type of alignment. That's always one of my favorite tropes. The other is, and we just mentioned this on a previous podcast, the archetype of the warrior priest, right? So a person that has two sides to themselves that you would think would be completely at odds, but when you strip away what the meaning is of those two sides, you realize, okay, there's a lot of commonality. So in the case of the warrior priest, it's about discipline, right? It's about faithfulness to a mission or whatever. And in one, it manifests itself in physical ability or tactical knowledge in violence. The other one, it manifests in, philosophy, and it manifests in, the reading of human nature, right? But it's a kind of a dichotomy for those two character types.
That's great. Yeah, we need more of those. I think we really need, those philosophical heroes who balance, who tread the line perhaps of good and evil and discuss it, mull it over during the plot, I think is a great idea. I
When
think
I
that's
love
really
characters that they know what they have to do and they resist doing it until they finally just give in to say, okay, this is the only way out. I have to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's the only way I can get through.
Well, and in the Gold Coast, John Sutter does exactly that, right?
Exactly.
Right. He does exactly that. He understands his marriage is in trouble. He sees coming up, and he definitely has to go fight the good fight. Yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
Yeah. The scene in that book that always resonates with me too is when he sunk his own boat,
Yeah,
like leading up to it,
right.
and he, shot a hole in the side of it. Right. You didn't see that coming at all. And it made sense later why he did that. And you kind of understand why he had to do that. But at that scene, it's like, whoa, wait, what is going on? Why did he sink his own boat? So that kind of those types of elements always really attract me in writing.
Right. And it had it had, he referenced Roman ruin and the ruins of the land in the beginning. There's this whole motif again of ruins and how society was crumbling, and it manifested itself in shooting the boat. So yeah, excellent point. So anyway, on to the book of the hour, which is The Breakfast Jury. So we're going to talk a little bit more about The Breakfast Jury now that we've heard about your background and other books. So let me read a couple reviews from The Breakfast Jury. Twisty crime, dry humor, easy to read, hard to put down. The Breakfast Jury is several books in one, a courtroom dramedy, an homage to the Breakfast Club, a fictionalized true crime account, and a redemption story. Humphrey manages to pull off all four of these narratives in 483 fast-paced pages and impressive feat. So, congratulations on your wonderful reviews for this story.
That is a nice review. I didn't know it was 483 pages long, though. Crap, that's a long book.
So a couple things, and we'll just kind of riff on this. So how did the idea come about? Tell us about that.
So this one needs to be grounded in reality and in a legal case. So people from the Kenosha, Racine area of Wisconsin may be familiar with the Mark Jensen trial. Mark Jensen poisoned his wife using antifreeze, his wife Julie. And it was kind of, a sordid type of affair. There's a lot of, things with adultery going on. But, he had been sentenced for life on the first trial and then came back around on an appeal because a federal judge found that a piece of evidence used during the first trial should not have been allowed. And so they vacated the verdict and prosecution brought him back up on charges. And I ended up being on the jury for that trial. I ended up being the jury foreman in the end for that trial. And that was in January of 2023. And the first time around when this trial was held, I think around 2008, it was the longest trial in the history of Wisconsin. It took 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks. Our version, when we did it, was 4 weeks, like 90 some different witnesses, evidence. There was computer evidence, there's physical evidence, all this. And it took us a full month to get through that. And so, you know how when you get thrown in a room with a bunch of strangers and you're there for a while, you start developing, relationships. And it generally starts with, oh, what do you do? What's your name? What do you do? You live around here, blah, 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 the kind of the surface level stuff. And when someone found out that I was an author, they said, oh, you should write a book about this trial.
Wow.
And I kind of resisted at first. I said, well, I don't really do nonfiction because I don't write nonfiction. I don't really have any affinity for writing nonfiction. And the other thing too is anytime you have a high profile trial somewhere in America, what comes out of it afterwards? A book. Somebody writes a book. And I don't really find those compelling. I don't read very many of them. Sometimes I'll watch the documentaries, but I don't really read them. So that I kind of shuffled off that idea and said, no, never mind. But as the weeks wore on and I'm just watching everybody in the room, kind of observing, getting to know people, I realized, wow, this is kind of like the Breakfast Club, right? There's 16 of us thrown together. You have 12 jurors and you have 4 alternates. We're thrown together. We're all strangers. And over the course of these weeks, we found out, we all have a lot more common than we thought. So it kind of relates to that whole theme of the Breakfast Club. The core theme of it was people are not as different as they seem to be on the outside. And I think it was the last week where I thought, you know what? There is a story here. There's a novel here, not a nonfiction retelling, but a novel here. And so I told them on the last day when we delivered the verdict, and we're just sitting back in the court or the jury room waiting to get let go. I said, okay, guys, 1 year from today, we're going to get together on a reunion and I'm going to have a book for you. Right. And it's going to be a book about us.
You like deadlines, don't you?
Well, and that's kind of if anybody listening and watching hasn't picked up, yes, that's a theme where I just give myself these stupidly ridiculous deadlines. And
good for you.
I think that's what makes me move, though. Otherwise, I'm naturally very, very procrastinative in my nature.
Like most writers. But you had a goal. Okay, so I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
I know I had a goal. And so I went, and I had 1 year, about 10 months to write this book. And so what I did is I used a lot of the evidence, the actions, the events from the trial as the backdrop for this book. And the whole premise of the book is that there's a private eye, a disgraced detective from Chicago, who is charged to find out how this group of people who got together ended up being poisoned. And it turned out that this was a jury that was sitting on a trial of a man who poisoned his wife using antifreeze. And when they got together 1 year later on a reunion, they ended up poisoned. And so the main characters got to figure out what's going on. Who are they? How are they related to each other? Who would poison them? Because the obvious revenge tactic doesn't fly because the dude's in jail. And so it's kind of this quasi reality thing. And it was funny because I published the book probably about 2 or 3 weeks before we actually were going to get together, our jury, for the reunion, because I wanted to have the hard copies on hand. So I had to publish them to get them ordered. And a couple of people read the book ahead of time. Like they knew it was coming out, or I think they were watching my author page maybe.
Yeah.
And one of them responded back, it's like, yeah, after reading Ken's book, I'm not sure I want to come to a reunion with him. Like, you're not going to buy us drinks, are you? So it's kind of, fantasy meets reality. It was fun, but
that's a BYO, right? Bring your own drink event.
Yep. And so the book, it kind of takes place on 2 levels, right? There's year 1 where the jury is going through this whole court, all the machinations, and it's kind of almost a reiteration of what we went through. And then there's the other layer of the book, which takes place 1 year later when they've reunited and been poisoned, and the private eye gets brought in to untangle it all. So the book flip-flops back and forth on this timeline.
You've got a flawed private eye.
A very flawed private eye. He was a main character in a previous trilogy I had written, and I felt like his story wasn't really completed at the end of that trilogy. And that was backed up by the fact that when my wife finished reading the 3rd book of that trilogy, she looked at me, she's like, what the hell? What happened to this dude? How can you leave me hanging like that? So I realized, okay, maybe I should include him as a character to kind of wrap up his story, at least put him to bed, so to speak. And so I was able to recycle that.
Christy's got a great comment. She said, "Let's open a business where we're partners and private investigators." And she
Yes.
goes, "I always wanted to be on a jury too."
Yep. Chrissy's gonna be my she's gonna be my lead investigator, the interrogator.
There we go.
She
And Roger too. Roger's on board with all of that. And you
all
have
right.
a couple of funny quotes. And I want to ask you about that time motif. Surveillance is about patience and a strong bladder. Made me laugh out loud. And I'm like, now that you've talked about the surveillance with the shoplifting, I'm like, you're drawing so much on your past
Yeah.
and your what you've experienced in life, your favorite authors, your past experience, and then just embedding what you love to read. I think it's so fabulous. And then we talked about earlier about your ticking clock motif, which I really liked. You referenced Y2K, and then the very beginning, you talk about this ticking clock. And immediately, as a reader, I picked up on that. So tell us what that means.
So, and it wasn't really even a conscious decision. It sort of kind of boiled itself out as I was writing. And the I set the actual book because it is a novel. I didn't set it in 2023 when my case or my trial went through. I kind of melded both trials and set it back in the year 2000 because again, that's when the character I wanted to use was active. It kind of fit with the timeline of the original trial, and plus I had some uh, technical reasons too. I didn't want it to be taking place in the age of cameras everywhere and
Mhm.
cell phone photos and texting. I needed a lack of technology for kind of my hook to play through. And so when it came to the time thing, the ticking time in the first scene, right? He looks up and there's a clock
Mhm.
ticking on the wall. And that's kind of a reference to the fact that, right, where he's at in his life, this private eye, his time is just ticking away. Like he doesn't know what he's doing with his life. He has no plan, no action. He's just wallowing in this self-pity because, his in the previous trilogy, he didn't handle things the way they should have been handled and all backfired on him. So there's this kind of sense that time is just ticking by with him.
Mhm.
And then, as we mentioned, pre-recording, you can't set a novel in 2000 and not at least reference Y2K.
Right.
Just like you can't set a novel in 2020 and at least not have some mention to the COVID, to the
Right.
pandemic era. So I had to bring that in as kind of a nod to that and as kind of what he had referenced in the previous trilogy about the countdown to Y2K, right? And
Right.
so all this kind of has it does have a time to it because
Yeah.
it's a very time bound book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, definitely. I love the technique of using that. And Christy says, Christy has a question. Ken, are you a plotter? How much did you plan before you started this? And you had your 10-month window.
right, so you would think with a 10-month window to write books, which I do way too often, there isn't time to plot, and that generally is true. Like my plot may be 5 different bullet points. With this book, because I was running 2 different timelines in the book, and I wanted the chapters to bounce back and forth. So something that happened during the trial may have a relation to what the private investigator is seeing 1 year later in the next chapter. So
Mhm.
I had to be pretty discreet in how I was bouncing back and forth in the timelines and how I was playing this out. So I did plot this book probably much more than any other book I've ever done. And I looked at it and I kind of, even right down to the dates. Like when does this happen? When did this happen? And what is the tie between, something that happened during the trial to what this private investigator just uncovered or realized or discovered. So I had to make sure that all those ties were clean. So I did very much plot at a time,
Mhm.
but that's not
Mhm.
my probably not my native style.
So, follow, what were the jurors' responses? Any surprises at all?
um I don't know if there were surprises. It's funny because we stayed in touch obviously after the case was over, right? And we had a chat thread going, and I told him I'd give him updates every now and then. And one of the jurors, a lady named Courtney, was very key in helping me kind of establish a lot of the things in Kenosha from 1999 and 2000 because she had lived there, right? So
Mhm.
she would tell me, where the Red Robin is now. Back in 1999, that was a different joint, a different restaurant. So she was very key in that. And another juror, I had to text her off to the side and say, listen, Nicole, I need somebody to die as part of my jury to set this to kick this whole thing off. I'm sorry, but I think you can handle it. So they're all really, really receptive. And yes, sure enough, 1 year later, when we all got together, I had books for everybody.
Oh,
And it
great.
was and we've all still stayed in touch. Right. We
Oh,
still
nice.
chat every now and then.
Great. Yeah, you're just such an example of somebody who enjoys books and gives a lot and gives back to the reader. So it's an inspiration.
And I mean, yeah, and I think that's an important thing for every author to do is kind of
Yeah.
you're writing for your readers. While a lot of us write and we purge ourselves of things that we need to,
Hmm.
process, good, bad, or otherwise, um, in the end, you're still writing for the readers, whether it's to keep them engaged, whether it's to pass on a lesson that you may, have learned, and whether it's just to entertain them, right?
Hmm.
You're writing for their purpose, not your own.
Right. Yeah. And that leads me, thank you for the segue. That leads me into Midwest Writers Room.
All right, the podcast.
So, what have you noticed? You've hosted this now. Is it you're going on your third season?
Yeah, we're 3.5, season 4, about 3.5 true, years into it.
Yeah. Good.
And
Good
so,
for you.
yeah, we've, I don't know, 100 guests we've run through. I couldn't even count, probably about 100 guests. And so, one of the things I notice is authors, we all have very similar, um, I don't know, I'll say very similar paths that we've walked, right? So the majority grew up readers, right? Many has some sort of education or career in writing.
Hmm.
Many put off writing while they're living the working years, right? I had a career, I had
Yep.
kids, I couldn't find the time to do it. But as my kids got older, then I jumped back into it. And so there's a lot of these very common trail markers along the way. Um, and I think too, a lot of us find inspiration in some of the same places, right? Whether it's something that we went through, or something that we observed in nature, or something that we read about that
Hmm.
triggers something. That's a lot of where my book ideas come from. I'll be reading an article, and it'll trigger a what if type question to me,
Hmm.
and that's I found very very common amongst many authors, especially ones who do novelization and not
Hmm.
so much memoir or nonfiction.
And Christy has a question. Who was your favorite guest ever?
Well,
Christy
of
wants to
course,
know.
that's got to be the person who has ranked the highest number of listens from our very first inaugural episode back in, I think, 2023. I don't remember her name. She was a good guest. I mean, might have been something started with Christy.
Might have been. And Christy, if you want, please tell us about your event you have coming up. You're going to be in La Crosse, right? You're going to be at a retreat.
Yes. Hi. Um, Ken, that was recorded. So there's a recording now of you saying that I was your favorite guest ever. So
I'm on
I just
record.
want you to know that. Okay. I have gone, there's this event coming up called the Faith Forward Writers Retreat. It's it's outside of La Crosse. It's at this really amazing location. Roger, who's on this call, has been there too. I've gone before as a writer on the like panel, but this year I'm teaching a workshop based on my newest book, Overruled, which is a book for middle grade readers. So, unfortunately, I think I'm 90% sure it's May 14th through the 16th, but I didn't prep that. So, um, it's a really, really great event. You're at this sort of like church monastery out in like the hills. It's beautiful. Um, I actually took off work to go to the whole thing so that I can find some time to write for myself too. So it'll be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Good for you. I'm so glad you're doing it, and it sounds amazing. And the gal who's organizing was at this event. She was at the Screenwriter Symposium, and so she and I chatted. And the beautiful thing about the Midwest Writers Room and what you're doing, Christy, and the symposium is what I saw on the campus was so many young people were there. and they were learning new ways to tell stories. Like they have, something called verticals. You can take your story, for example, The Breakfast Jury, or Christy, your book, which I had sitting right here. I'm sorry, I don't have it. But you can take a scene from it and do just a vertical on your phone, just a short scene with a couple characters and show that as a supplement to what you've written. And it's a fascinating way that storytelling is changing. And so and it was so delightful this weekend to see all the young people there. To your point, Ken, it was like, a lot of times it's somebody in their third act, like me, who had a career before and now has the time to do it. But you have this influx of young people telling stories, and I found it quite invigorating and exciting to see. It was on UW campus too, so but it was about half and half, and it was really, really great to see. So anyway, anything else you want to add about your guests on the Midwest Writers Room?
So, we obviously focus on writers from the Midwest. We branch out though, and we'll bring in writers from other areas around the country, and we're also roping in people that are writer adjacent, right? So literary agents, publishers, indie bookstores, right? We've done a number of indie bookstores over the last year. And so we just continue to grow the program. We've got, and for anybody out there listening to this who's sent emails and haven't heard back, we've got the pipeline stock. Bear with me. It takes a while to get through all the applications to this, but we've got a guest list probably out for another year without soliciting a single new name. And so, there's plenty of interest amongst I think the writing community, just to listen to other writers, right? To listen that the struggles that you're going through as a writer, when you hit that 40,000 word slog and you just feel like you're such a fraud and you have no idea how to get out of it. That's not just you, right? That's very common amongst everybody. So I think that's really why this podcast keeps growing, is that people realize, wow, my problems are not just my problems writing, right? The things I struggle with, a lot of people are struggling with out there. And I listen, and that's how they get through it. Oh. And so we kind of help build the community of local authors, of Midwestern authors, build that community just through these shared type experiences. So even if they never meet this person in person, they're like, oh, that one author I listened to, they ran into the exact same issue that I had when writing my book, and what they said helped me out, right? So it kind of helps build that connection, whether it's real or just imagined, and that just ties it all tighter together, I think.
Right. And remember, we have a YouTube channel. So the Midwest Writers Room, there's a YouTube channel that you can go and listen to past episodes if you're not, so you have audio and the video versions. Yep. And the Wispresso Cafe is on there. So if you've been a guest, take your link and put that link everywhere, right? So just because we had this moment on a Saturday morning from 10 to 11, you're like, oh, that was one time. But take that link and it can go live on your website. It can go live in your emails that you send out to your subscriber list. There's so many different ways that you can spread the word about your writing technique and the books that you have coming out. Now you can support other writers like this. Like I see Roger said, he's talking about Christy, your event. I would be there if not already booked. So Roger, let us know where you're going to be. Post it in a link there, and then you can share that information with other people if you want to go ahead and share this podcast too. So there's so many ways to get the word out.
And that's one thing I tell all our guests as well is, yes, as long as we do this show and we use these same platforms, that will be the links for your episode will always be your marketing artifact. Right. We understand as writers, writing's only half the job. And it's probably the easier part of the job comparing to marketing and building your audience. Well, this is just an artifact that helps you do that. And the more of these types of interviews you can do, the more you build your catalog of, recognizing yourself and being able to publish yourself out there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. So anything, Ken, I need to mention your upcoming appearances, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, before we talk about these upcoming appearances, one thing I think I'm going to try, once I finish my son's book, which I've done the first draft, I just revision, so probably another month on that. Before I jump into my next series, I'm going to try my hand at creating from the first Ghoul book. Like I'll take the first chapter, see if I can create an AI movie based on that chapter.
Wow, good for
I've already
you.
started playing around with the likenesses of my daughter and some of her friends, kind of in more of a illustrative style. So it's not super
Mhm.
realistic, but more of an illustrative style. But to see if I can actually convert that chapter into just a single scene, AI scene. And if I can, I may try and do as much of the book as I can, just as
Right.
probably for my own curiosity, because it just looks cool to do, but
So
also
you're
something for
doing
them.
essentially a vertical, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
So you're going
yeah.
to do that. What platform are you on? 11 Labs or what
It'll probably
technology?
be C Dance, which is a
Oh,
newer AI movie
mhm,
illustration. But there's so many different packages out there you can use.
mhm.
Half the battle is trying to figure out what the best platform, what the best tool is to use.
And then where do you find your prompts? Are you writing the prompts? And do you have a
I will
creative
write the
brief or
prompts.
something
Yep,
already established?
I will write the prompts myself. One good thing though, in this world of AI, you can just feed your chapter into like
Mhm.
ChatGPT or Grok or something. It's like, give me 15 prompts based
Mhm.
on this chapter for a video and that, and it'll come and you can sit and tweak out whatever. But it just becomes so regenerative to be able to do some of this stuff without having to recreate everything brand new.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we'll see how that works. It's just kind of an experiment for me, but I'm curious to try my hand at that.
Well, and I think the key, and this is what I found at the Screenwriter Symposium, why they were actually opening the door to novelists, because usually it's there's kind of a separation between the two, but I think you already have the story established. Your story's
Mhm.
already there. So you're
Right.
saying you're showing different ways that you can tell that story.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I
we
mean,
had print. Oh, go ahead.
just think if we can just take our books, right, and regenerate them into a script, right,
Hmm.
and that script becomes a series of prompts. And then if
Hmm.
you learn how to use the different tools, suddenly you've popped out, I don't know, a 10-minute, a 20-minute um, video of
Right,
your book. I mean, think about what kind of a tool that would be to kind of help
right,
market yourself, to help bring other readers and or watchers into it, right? You just kind of diversified your exposure plan
right.
for
And so
yourself.
you could do a trailer. You could do
Yeah.
you could do a 60-second book trailer
Yep.
with prompts like what you're describing. So you could do your
Yep.
scene and or do your trailer and have that as a promotional opportunity for your work.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting to see how this is all going to develop because,
Yeah. I'm
you
not
know,
promising anything. I'm not that smart sometimes when it comes to stuff, but I'll see what I can do.
well, you certainly have the skill. You've got the story, you've got the interest in it, you've got, you've got technology skill, and you want to do it. So that seems to be the perfect combination.
All right. The ingredients are there. Now I just have to get off my procrastinating butt and do it.
Well, you work out. Don't forget, you're
Right.
going to get in shape too.
In the middle of a workout.
So I just want to mention where you will be appearing. I will see
Okay.
you at the Mukwonago Book Festival on May 17th from 10 to 4 o'clock. You
Correct.
will be at the WWA Press Panel at the Heedburg Public Library Book Fest in Janesville on June 20th. You will have a Midwest Writers Room remote broadcast from the Novel in Progress Book Camp in Racine on June 25th. And you also I will see you there at the Lakeside Literary Festival in Lake Geneva on August 15th. Christy, you'll be there too at the Lakeside Literary Festival in Lake Geneva, put on by the library and Lakeside Books in LG. That's a wonderful indie bookstore
Yes.
there. And
And
by
just a
the
shout
way,
out, well, just a shout out to Lakeside. They're actually going to be our next feature-length guest on the Midwest Writers Room. Alicia
oh,
will
great.
be coming on. And so in a few, I think early May is when her episode will release.
Oh, great. Congrats, Alicia. She's worked so hard down there and she's got a lovely, lovely bookstore. And by the way, Indie Bookstore Day is April 25th. So if you can, between now and then and afterward, somehow support your local bookstore, go in, buy a gift card, buy a book, share their information on your social media, and support indies as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Ken. This has been really fun. Thanks everybody for joining. And the Wispresso Cafe is where books, writers, and Wisconsin meets over coffee and a mimosa if you like. It's up to you. The next episode is May 8th with guests Christine DeSmet and Peggy Joke Williams. Take care and happy writing, everyone, and happy spring.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Tracy.
You bet.